All right, so you guys have really given us quite a lot to unpack here. A whole bunch of online discussions and forum posts all about this Pizzagate thing.
Yeah.
Specifically, all the stuff about James Alefantis.
Right.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is kind of go through all that and really look at the specific, the actual claims they're making about him and the details they're using to back it all up. Almost like we're taking apart this piece of the whole Pizzagate puzzle, just seeing how it's all put together according to these sources at least.
Exactly. And it's important to remember where all this is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're talking about places like Reddit. That's our conspiracy subreddit and 4chan's poll board.
Oh, yeah. Those
are kind of notorious for being like echo chambers, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Where ideas can spread really fast and it's all anonymous, so it can be hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Right.
Our goal here isn't to say whether any of it's true or not.
Right.
But to really get a handle on what these sources are claiming as facts about James Alefantis.
Okay, so we're basically following the trail they've laid out.
Yeah.
We're going to go through all the stuff about Alefantis, his businesses, his social media, and all these supposed connections to the bigger Pizzagate story.
Exactly as it's presented in these online discussions.
Okay, so let's start with the claims about his businesses. What's the deal with that Bucks fishing and camping thing I saw that pop up a bunch?
Yeah, so one of the first things they bring up is that Alefantis isn't just involved with Comet Ping Pong.
Right.
They're claiming he owns this other business too, Bucks Fishing and Camping. And the way they're talking about it is like it's not just some regular outdoorsy business. They're suggesting it could be a front for something more private.
Yeah.
Maybe even like secret group activities.
So they're saying he's got these public businesses like the pizza place.
Right.
But then behind the scenes, maybe something a little more,
shady.
Yeah.
Yeah, shady, okay.
And to back this up, they point to this website, bucksfishingandcamping.com, where they say there's information directly linking Alefantis to it. So basically they're trying to show he's got this hidden side, right?
Right.
All right, well, speaking of online stuff, let's talk about his social media. They really went in on his Instagram, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. A huge chunk of what you shared is all about Alefantis' Instagram account. The main claim is that he was posting all these photos of weird rooms and hinting at building underground spaces.
Underground spaces?
Yeah. And the comments on these photos are what really freaked people out. They were interpreted as being super creepy and suggestive, like he's joking about filling them with friends.
Okay, so let's get specific here. What were some of the photos they were pointing to?
There's this one photo they mention of some guys digging a big hole.
Uh-huh.
And Alefantis is supposedly commenting on it, saying things like filling it and a lineup.
A lineup of what I mean?
It's all very vague, and that's what makes it so unsettling, I guess. Then there's this other photo that apparently showed a huge freezer.
A freezer?
Yeah, and people in these threads were calling it a kill room.
Yep.
With all these accompanying comments that were seen as, super dark and ominous. It's like the internet can take something totally normal.
Right.
And twist it into something terrifying.
It's amazing how quickly they can build a whole narrative around just a few photos, right?
Exactly. And what they also kept bringing up was that after all this online investigating started blowing up, Alefantis went and deleted a ton of his Instagram posts.
Really?
Yeah. And then he made his account private, which, to these people was like a sure sign that he was guilty or trying to hide something.
Well, yeah. I mean, it does make you wonder, right? Why delete everything if you've got nothing to hide?
Right. It's classic conspiracy thinking. Any attempt to control information is seen as proof of a cover-up.
So sometimes what's not there can be just as incriminating as what is there.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got these businesses, the Instagram stuff. Now they start talking about all these connections he supposedly has.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting, is now we're talking about some big names.
Oh.
They're saying Alefantis is linked to Hillary Clinton, even mentioning a private letter she supposedly sent him.
Wow.
And then they bring up Barack Obama, David Brock,
yeah,
for Media Matters for America,
right?
George Soros, Marina Abramovich, and both Podesta brothers, John and Tony.
That's a pretty powerful list, right?
Yeah, and they're not just casually mentioning these names. They're saying these connections are hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
Like one source even calls Alefantis the Achilles heel for these people.
Meaning he could bring them all down.
Yeah, exactly. The implication is that all these powerful figures are somehow involved in whatever Alefantis is supposedly up to.
All right, let's take a closer look at one of these connections. What about this Marina Abramovich link?
So the way they describe it is that Alefantis and Abramovich are connected through mutual friends who are involved in these anti-Christian protests.
Anti-Christian protests?
Yeah, and they're also defending what they called anti-Christian art.
Huh.
And they point to this photo as proof. Supposedly, it shows James Alefantis, this guy Jan Rothschild, who they claim is a close associate of Marina Abramovich.
Okay.
And a woman named Victoria Reese, all together at one of these protests. So they're saying that because they all hang out in the same circles and go to the same events, there must be something deeper going on.
All right, and I saw something about Alefantis and this Victoria Reese woman promoting Abramovich at Tony Podesta's house.
Right. That's another event they bring up to try and solidify the connection between these people. It's like they're trying to build this whole network of relationships.
Yeah, and then it just keeps expanding, right? Because then they bring up this Axel Vervoort guy.
Yeah, so they claim Marina Abramovich is seen working with Vervoort. And the reason this is so important to them is because apparently Vervoort is mentioned in this ISGP overview of the Dutroux dossier.
And what are those?
Well, it's basically a collection of documents related to this huge pedophile ring case in Belgium.
Oh, wow.
And Vervoort is named in there as a suspected child trafficker.
So they're connecting Alefantis to Abramovich and Abramovich to this guy who's potentially involved in child trafficking.
Exactly. It's all about creating this chain of associations.
Like guilt by association.
Right.
Okay, so another name that pops up constantly is Maccoby. Like the whole Maccoby family.
Yeah, they become pretty central to this whole thing because of Nora Maccoby's friendship with James Alefantis.
Okay.
And what they really focus on is that Nora has known this woman named Anneke Lucas since 1991.
And who's Anneke Lucas?
She's someone who claims to be a survivor of that same Belgian pedophile ring we were just talking about.
Oh, wow. So they're saying there's a direct link between Alefantis' friend.
And a victim of this international child trafficking ring.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant connection.
Yeah.
Especially because Lucas claims she was trafficked all over the world, possibly even to the U.S.
And they mentioned that Nora and Lucas interact on social media too, right?
Yeah, liking and commenting on each other's posts, which for them just adds more fuel to the fire.
Yeah, because it shows they've got this long-standing relationship, right? So within the whole Pizzagate context, it makes you wonder what exactly their connection is all about.
Exactly.
And it doesn't stop there. They start digging into Nora's whole social circle, right?
Yeah, bringing up people like Don Spizzy, who they claim is linked to Alefantis through online interactions.
Okay.
And then there's Isette Folger, who's Nora's sister.
Mm-hmm.
They even bring up this guy, Justin Barrows, who was the carpenter who worked on Comet Ping Pong.
Oh, wow. So they're really going deep.
Yeah. And they claim he and Alefantis were both involved in these Adoption Days events.
Adoption Days, that sounds...
I know. And it's like they're trying to find something sinister in every little detail.
Yeah. So what's the deal with Isette Folger?
Well, she's on the advisory board for this organization called Innocence at Risk, which is all about fighting child trafficking.
Wait, so they're saying someone connected to Alefantis is involved in anti-trafficking work?
Yeah, and it gets even weirder because there's this other woman, Barbara Harrison, who shows up in photos with Alefantis and is also involved in Adoption Days. She's connected to Innocence at Risk, too.
So it's like they're trying to say these people are involved in both sides of it.
Right. That they could be using their work with anti-trafficking organizations as a cover or a way to deflect suspicion.
It's like that whole thing where they say the best place to hide something is in plain sight.
Exactly. It's a common theme in conspiracy theories.
Okay. But then it gets even more complicated because then they bring up Nora and Isette's father, Michael Maccoby.
Yeah, so he's got this leadership role with this organization called Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, which is Friends of the Orphans in English.
Friends of the Orphans, okay.
It's a group that runs homes for kids who are orphans or have been abandoned.
Right.
And then his son, Max Maccoby, is on the board of directors for Friends of the Orphans, too.
So the whole family is involved in this organization that works with vulnerable children.
Yeah. And to make things even more suspicious, Max was also a lawyer for both James Alefantis and David Brock at one point.
Wow, so they're really tying all these threads together.
Right. But it's interesting because they also quote this guy, Robert David Steele, who wrote the foreword to a book that Nora Maccoby illustrated.
Okay.
And he supposedly visited her, too. Anyway, he's quoted as saying that accusing legitimate orphan services is a rookie mistake in Pizzagate investigations.
So even within these Pizzagate circles, there's some disagreement about how far to take it.
Yeah, like maybe they're acknowledging that sometimes they go too far.
Interesting. Okay, so then there's this whole thing about Laura Silsby in Haiti.
Right, so this ties back to Friends of the Orphans. The claim is that this human trafficker named Jorge Anibal Torres Puello, who was arrested in Haiti, said he had connections to Laura Silsby.
And she's the woman who tried to take all those kids out of Haiti after the earthquake.
Exactly.
Right, and she got in a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah. So Puello is saying these kids that Silsby was trying to take were actually from Friends of the Orphans.
So they're using this to connect people involved in alleged trafficking to this organization that the McCoby family is involved with.
Right. And of course, they also bring up Bill Clinton's involvement in the Silsby case.
Of course.
Because it implies a connection to higher levels of power.
Right. It's all about making those connections.
Exactly.
Okay, so another piece of evidence they keep bringing up is this #chickenlover hashtag.
Oh yeah, that one caused a lot of stir. The claim is that it was found on Comet Ping Pong's Instagram account.
Uh-huh.
And it was attached to a photo of a man with a little boy.
Okay, so obviously that's going to raise some red flags.
Yeah, but the sources also include a counter-argument.
Oh, really?
They say the photo was actually of Scott Cummings with his daughter, Karis James.
Oh.
And Karis is actually James Alefantis' goddaughter. They also point out that a lot of the pictures of kids on Alefantis' Instagram were of Karis and her sister.
So it's like a perfect example of how things can be taken out of context online.
Yeah, what seems super creepy at first glance might have a totally innocent explanation.
Right, but in the Pizzagate world, everything is suspicious, even if it's totally normal.
That's true.
Okay, so another disturbing thing they brought up was about Alefantis' sister, Susan.
Yeah, so apparently she wrote a letter in support of a teacher who was convicted of molesting 5 girls at this school in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And the online discussions really latch onto this.
Well, yeah, because it makes you think about the family dynamic, right?
Right. Their argument is that if his sister is defending a child molester, maybe there's a history of that kind of behavior in the family.
And that makes it more likely that Alefantis himself could be involved.
Exactly. It's a pretty roundabout way of thinking, but it's definitely part of the narrative they're building.
Okay, so then we get to those Podesta emails that were leaked.
Right, so remember all the hype about those?
Yeah.
Well, in those emails, there were some mentions of the words kerchief and pizza map.
And those are supposed to be code words or something?
Yeah, people thought it was super weird and started speculating that they were talking about ways to hide or get rid of evidence.
Like secret code.
Right, but there's no real proof of that. It's just another example of how they take these little details and twist them into something sinister.
It's all about interpretation, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so another connection they bring up is to the Washington Ballet.
Yeah, they talk about James Alefantis, Nora McCoby, this guy Septime Webro, who's involved with the ballet, and then Charles DeSantis and David McDermott.
Okay, and who are they?
Well, apparently they were at those Adoption Days events, too.
Oh.
And they're both linked to the Washington Ballet.
Okay, so...
And they point out that DeSantis was seen taking his kid to the Washington Ballet.
So they're basically saying that because Alefantis and his friends are connected to this ballet company, which obviously involves children...
It's automatically suspicious.
Right.
Even though there's no evidence of anything inappropriate happening.
It's guilt by association again.
Exactly.
Now, remember how everyone was saying Comet Ping Pong didn't have a basement?
Oh, yeah. That was a big part of the early debunking efforts.
Right, because if there's no basement, then there's no place for all this trafficking to be happening.
Right, but your sources point out that Alefantis himself mentioned the basement in an article from before all this Pizzagate stuff blew up.
Really? So they're saying there actually is a basement?
Yeah, and they're using that to discredit anyone who said there wasn't one. Like maybe it was a cover-up.
So it just adds another layer of mystery to it all?
Yeah, it's hard to know what to believe sometimes.
All right, so lastly, we need to talk about that whole thing with the gunman at Comet Ping Pong.
Yeah, that was a pretty scary event. A guy walked into the pizza place with a gun.
And what did they say he was trying to do?
Well, in the Pizzagate narrative, he's often portrayed as a hero.
A hero?
Yeah, like he was trying to shoot into the basement to save the children.
Oh, wow. So they're using that to justify their whole theory.
Exactly.
But thankfully no one was hurt, right?
No, luckily no one was hurt. There was some property damage, but that was it.
That's good, at least. But that whole incident really put Pizzagate on the map, didn't it?
Yeah, it definitely made it a lot harder to dismiss as just some crazy online conspiracy theory.
All right, so to wrap this all up, we've basically gone through all the main points they're using to support their claims about James Alefantis and Pizzagate.
Right, we've looked at this Buck's fishing and camping business, his Instagram, all those alleged connections to powerful people. Marina Abramovich, the McCoby family.
Right, and then there's the Laura Silsby case, that #chickenlover, hashtag the stuff about his sister Susan. Those weird words in the Podesta emails, the Washington Ballet connection, the whole basement debate and the gunman incident.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
It really shows how these online communities can piece together all these seemingly unrelated bits of information.
Yeah, and create this whole elaborate narrative.
Exactly. So after hearing all of this, What do you think about how these kinds of theories take shape online?
It's fascinating and a little bit scary too, right? Like how easily people can get caught up in this stuff.
Definitely, and it raises a lot of questions about how we evaluate information online, especially when it comes from these anonymous, unverified sources.
Exactly. So if you're out there listening to this, we really encourage you to do your own research. Look into the people and organizations we've talked about.
Don't just take our word for it or the word of these online forums.
Yeah, and remember that social media posts can be misleading. Make sure you understand the context before you jump to conclusions.
And always be critical of the information you come across online, especially when it comes to these kinds of complex and often disturbing theories.
The more we dig into these kinds of things, the more important it is to stay skeptical and think for ourselves.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you guys next time.